So we go through this process of trying to mediate 7 times. 7 times. And every time after the first time, Judge Keys is like, Miss Huff, you always smiling. It's always good to see you. I said, yes, Judge Keys. Yes, sir. So this seventh time, um, Sheriff Dart is now the sheriff. And we're sitting in the courtroom. I had just given Jeff a check paying on my services. And the judge comes right out. He says, hi, everyone. You and Jeff, come on back and let's get this started. So I go back and he's like, how you doing, Miss Huff? And I'm like, I'm fine, Judge Keys. How are you? And he's like, you're still smiling, Miss Huff. I said, yes, Judge Keys, as always. And he's like, Miss Huff, did you notice who walked in the courtroom today? I said, no, Your Honor, I didn't. He said, one of the attorneys that walked in is the state's attorney, and the other attorney is the personal attorney for Sheriff Dart. So what I'm gonna do? Then he said, "Wait a minute." He said, "Did you know that you've been here 7 times?" I said, "No, Judge Keys, I didn't. I didn't really pay attention to it." Judge Keys had taken the time to go back through the file, and he had on a sticky note that he showed me each date he had wrote down that I had been there 7 times, and this was the seventh time. And he said, well, I'm gonna go out and see what they have to say, and we're gonna see what we're gonna do. So he goes out and talks to them. He comes back and he mentions it again. He says, you know, one of the attorneys that's out there is the personal attorney for Sheriff Dart, and he's here to settle your case, and he wants to give you what it will take to settle this case. The state's attorney is totally against it and adamant and doesn't want to give you anything. But I think we can come to some resolution today now that that Sheriff Dart's personal attorney is here and they trust me. So, Miss Huff, 999,000. It's not a million, but it's awfully close. So let me see what I can do. So we spend some time going back and forth, going back and forth, going back and forth, negotiating. And he just kept saying to me, 999,000 isn't a million, but it's awfully close. And I just smiled and say, yes, Judge Keys, you're right. You're right, Judge Keys. So he comes in after several back and forths, and he comes in with a good number. So he says, Miss Huff, I want you to really take a look at this number. I'm going to step out so you and your attorneys can talk this over amongst yourselves and let's see what you come up with. I said, okay, Judge Keys, no problem. So he steps out, and Andre Grant is there from the first trial. And my deal with Andre Grant was that if we don't win, I don't owe you anything. But Jeff was like, Yorley, he can um, come after us. He has billable hours. I know the kind of woman that you are, and I know you always want to do the right thing. So let's invite him. Let's not have him go through any other difficulties to resolve our fees with him. And I was like, Jeff, he didn't win. My deal with him, he didn't win. I don't give a fuck. I'm not trying to hear all of this rigmarole. And he's like, Yorley, let's just do it this way and take care of him, and we're done with it. So I'm like, okay. So we're in the judge's chamber, Andre and Jeff, and I'm not saying anything. So Jeff and Andre are talking about what they could get and how they want to split this figure. And I'm just looking at them like, really? So they just talking, they going back and forth. I'm just listening. So finally I said, wait one damn minute. If either of you think that I'm going to fucking walk out of this room with less money than either of you, both of you all are sadly mistaken. I am the one who experienced all of this trauma. I am the one who has gone through everything. And if you, either one of you, fucking think I'm leaving out of here, y'all got another thing coming. I'll fucking turn down the number and I'll walk away. So get this shit together and figure it out. So they're looking, eyes bugged, mouth open, like, what? And I meant every word that I said. So now the conversation changes. And Jeff is like, Miss Huff. I said, oh, I'm Miss Huff now, right? Okay. All right. What? Well, why don't Andre and myself go out in the hallway and see what we can work out and let's come back. I said, yeah, take y'all asses in the hallway and see what the fuck y'all gonna work out. Because again, I'm not leaving with less than the two of y'all. Get it understood. Go and do whatever you gotta do. Work it out. I'll be here. So they go out in the hallway and work out whatever they work out, and they come back, and Jeff is like, Miss Huff. I said, oh, Miss Huff, really? I'm willing to take this, and Andre is willing to take that, and this will leave you with this amount. So I'm like, yeah, okay. All right. Call Judge Keys back in here. So Judge Keys comes back in his chambers, and we like, we got a deal. And Judge Keys looks at me. He's like, I told you, Miss Huff, 999,000 isn't a million, but it's awfully close. I said, yes, Judge Keys, you are right. And so I hate that I gave Jeff that payment when I came into court, not knowing that we were going to settle. I could have had that money in my pocket, but righteously so, I owed a bill and I needed to pay. So that's how we end the court case against the sheriff. Now, during my tenure undercover, there I got married late 92, 93. And during that time I was I had a year or a year and a half or so under my belt being undercover. And I got married. And I reflect on that because at that time, looking back, I realized that I had not healed from all of the childhood trauma, all of the molestation, the low self esteem, being overweight, trying to commit suicide myself. I had not healed from that. And my, it's called trauma bonding now that I have a word for it. My trauma attracted my husband's trauma, and he was abused as a child as well. And our lack of being healed, our experiences of trauma attracted each other to each other because we kind of bonded. We bonded on a level that the two of us together, having had the past experiences that we had, we are able to tackle the world together. And unfortunately, that was poor thinking. He was the child of drug addicted parents. His natural father passed away of a heroin overdose, and his mother was heavily using drugs while she was pregnant with him. And essentially, he was a drug baby and didn't have all of the neurons to process stressful situations and different experiences um, of trauma that I had younger. I experienced my grandmother fighting my granddad and my mother and father fighting. So fighting um, was not unusual to me, and it wasn't something that would have alarmed me or set off a red flag for me because I grew up in that type of environment. And I just remember um, when I was dating my first husband that um, there was a confrontation about his car being somewhere that it shouldn't have been over his ex's house and confronting him about it. And we get into a big tussle and a fight over my gun, my um, service weapon. And in the tussle, I ended up getting hit in the eye and having a black eye. And we ended up in the garage. And he's threatening to commit suicide with my service weapon. And all I can think of is that I'm having a hard time at work already. And if this happens, this is not going to be good. So I'm trying to talk him down, trying to calm him down. And he shoots off a round in the garage, in the roof of the garage. And I'm just thinking, I need to get this weapon from him. We got to get out of this garage. And I'm hoping nobody calls the police because he had an apartment in Bellwood and we were at his apartment when this happened. And the towns of Bellwood, Maywood, Hillside, Broadview are very close knit towns. They all border each other. And our undercover office was in Hillside at the time. And I have worked and know the chief and the officers in all of those towns. And my husband at the time, was also known in all of these towns because he was a high school basketball star destined to go to the pros, but ends up shattering his knee and not being able to go. So I the weekend that this happens, I am supposed to drive to Springfield to receive award from Jim Edgar, who is the governor, for my outstanding feats and accomplishments in undercover work. But I can't go because I have a black eye and I have no way to get around this. So I end up calling my superiors and letting them know that I'm sick and I can't make the drive, and they bring the award back. And that just added more fuel to the fire. Like, you're ungrateful. The governor wanted to honor you, and you couldn't even make it down there to get the award, and just any excuse for them to light into me or have a reason to say anything negative to me. So we get through that incident. And this was before we got married. So we end up getting married and building a house out in Bolingbrook from the ground up. I was still caregiver for my granddad. My grandmother had passed away. And so it was the three of us. And um, my husband knew that this was my job. So at this point, I'm deep undercover and I can get a page 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I gotta go. I gotta respond. And sometime into our marriage, his mother, who kept him away from his natural father and his natural father's family, remarried. And the stepfather that she married is on drugs as well. This is earlier on. My husband at the time was a child. And he, the stepfather, begins to sexually abuse my first husband. And the mother knows about it. And the mother refuses to do anything about it. So Tony grows up. He's now in high school and he's a basketball star and he worked. And all of his life, he wanted the attention of his mother. Anything that he would give to his mother, he would always write, "Your number one son." She remarried, had two more children, so he had two younger siblings as a result of the second marriage. And the stepfather, he's on the basketball court, he works, and he bought himself a gold chain. In some kind of way, the stepfather finds out about it, goes to the basketball court, and beat him bloody in front of everyone and embarrassed him. And so he gets home and has the receipt for the chain where he paid for it and shows his mother. And she's just tells him, if you don't like the way he runs his household, you can leave. So at 16, he's homeless. And then he goes and stays with the Donalds, his high school friend, childhood friend. She takes him in. And ever since then, even before then, he's fighting for his mother's affection. So having that abuse not being addressed just causes more stress and drama because you begin to walk in life with these shades of abuse that need to be addressed and they're not. So they began to manifest in other ways. And he, in stressful situations, would get very violent. And that that one incident happened, and then I always kept my weapon on me, and I never would let him know where I would lock away my weapons. He never would know. But this one particular night, we were going to one of his friends' birthday celebrations and things. There was some tension, and we were about to walk out the door to leave. And for some reason, I was like, oh, let me put this weapon away. And I had some boots in the closet right at the door. So he saw me put my weapon inside the boot in the closet, and then we leave. I am not and never have been a person to really fake or pretend about my emotions. If things aren't right, they're just not right. And I'm not going to pretend that they're right. So, of course, he's around his friends, and I'm just not showing any interest. I'm just there to be supportive and non-talkative and not happy. And so people begin to ask me like, is everything okay? Are you all right? And I'm just like, everything's fine. So we get into an argument driving home from downtown. And we were in my car, which was a stick shift. And he becomes enraged because of the way that I had been acting at the party. And he burns out the gears, and we end up down by Canal Street where the old post office used to be. And he wants to physically fight. So we're physically fighting in the car, and he knows that I don't have my weapon because he saw me put it in the boot before we left out. So he's trying to, the car, he burned out the gears, it's not working. So we have to pull over to the side, and he jumps out and tries to open the passenger door. So I'm pulling the door in, he's pulling the door out, and He finally gets the door open and snatches me out and throws me on the ground and begins to stomp me with his feet until his rage passes. And he helps me back in the car, and I'm sitting in the car, and I'm just like, something isn't right. I'm not feeling right. I need to go to the emergency room. So we call a cab, and we get in the cab, and the cab takes me to the nearest hospital and emergency room, and then I'm not even for sure where he went. So I end up calling a friend and telling her where I'm at, because I'm going to go to her house to stay. And this is this is it. I'm filing charges, I'm pressing charges, and we're going to go through this because this is going too far.